Hello and welcome to the second episode in Season 5 of the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. The Doñana County Clerk's Office in Las Cruces, New Mexico created this 5 seasons ago, and it has been a hit in a lot of different ways. We don't just focus on elections. We focus on all of the things that we do here at the Doñana County Clerk's Office, including the history of our community, because we are the record holders. And we're fortunate to be able to often get people who have direct history in what we have stored here that we house for them, so they're able to go do deep dives into what we have, and it's been pretty fun. We often focus on elections, and my joke is always, it's the sexy side of our office, and I only say that because it often gets the most press, but both sides of our office do amazing work, and I'm happy to be here. Who am I? My name is Amanda López Askin. I am very, very proud to currently serve as your county clerk. And we are here today with a very special guest. And we say that every time. We say, this is a very special guest. Every guest is special, but I'm pretty honored to have somebody who is been on the forefront of elections, and Commissioner Donald Palmer. And what I will say is, he's now chair. So will you tell us a little bit about your role? And before we get into that, I'll let Janice Giron introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her and what she's doing and why this is interesting to her.
I am Janice Giron. I am the Supervisor for the Bureau of Elections. I have been in elections for approximately 20 years. Currently in elections, we are working on a lot of different projects to kind of bring our office up to date with technology.
Modernization.
Yeah. It should be an interesting election.
It's always an interesting election, that's for sure. But I appreciate Janice because she's a detail person. I'm a concept person. Janice is a detail person, and she is so good at it that we listen to pretty much everything she tells us to do. So that's the great news. But Commissioner, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you actually have a background in the military, and it was kind of a windy road to get to where you are, but your career seems to have been focused on elections and elections integrity. And I'm fortunate to be able to have gotten to know you over the last couple of years because I do serve on the local leadership council, which advises your commission. So feel free to take it from here.
So, I got into elections because I really had an interest in it, but I was in the military. I was serving overseas, and even as a lawyer, you can vote or try to vote. There's a story behind that, but you really couldn't get involved in anything other than military justice, for example, or military duties. And so, I was able to come back, and when I got out of the military, I was able to go. One of the first jobs I had was at the Department of Justice, working in the voting section. And that was enforcing the federal voting laws like the Voting Rights Act, the NVRA with the National Voter Registration Act, and HAVA, Help America Vote Act, and many of those laws. And so as a lawyer, that was a great job. I actually sort of started to migrate toward election administration because of my duties enforcing HAVA. I got to talk to a lot of election officials, and eventually I was offered the job down in Florida. And that's really how I got involved in election administration, was as the director in Florida. I then moved on to Virginia to be their secretary, which was the chief election official there. And then I did some other work at the Bipartisan Policy Center before I got tapped to serve on the Election Assistance Commission. And so that's been my migration and journey from military duties, serving as an officer in a JAG, to getting involved in voting. And as you know, once you're in voting and you've been captured, there's really no way out. At that point, you are in the business.
Well, Commissioner, we call New Mexico the land of enchantment, but there's often a joke of it's the land of entrapment. And sometimes for sure, I feel like once you kind of if you like it, you love it. I will tell you, I always tell the story. I had a staff member who was wonderful, but she just seemed kind of wilted after a while. So we sat down to do her yearly eval. And so sometimes I just set stuff aside. I set the paperwork aside and I just said to her, "Do you like this job?" And she says, "I hate elections." And I said, "Okay, let's find something else for you, because you're right. Once you're in it, if you are in it, you're passionate about it. I can speak for myself. My background's in mental health, working with young people, advocacy policy, and education. So this was a windy road also for me to get here. I was appointed and then I've been elected. But what happened was I fell in love with elections. And I always say, like, I have a righteous indignation about the elections that we have, and defending them because we do a great job. There's always going to be the things that we need to, shore up. But overall, I think that is something that we should always promote. I want to talk about your current role on the Election Advisory Commission. You're the federal arm of elections. That's how I describe you all, but maybe you can give a better description of that, only because the role that I have in the local leadership council representing New Mexico to you all is important. We actually give you information that you actually take back to potentially implement that could affect us federally. And I think it's important to punctuate that because states run their own elections. If you've been to one state and voted there, you've been to one state and voted there. They're all different. So can you tell me what the influence is and how you all oversee what we do as states?
Well, the Congress created the EAC just, from a historic perspective. You talked about this a little bit earlier. It came out of the Bush v. Gore litigation and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And remarkably, the Congress was able to adopt the Help America Vote Act out of what came out of there, where the court basically said the court was really concerned about the lack of uniformity when it came to, ballots and ballot counting. And so the Congress really took that to heart. And they wanted to do was create minimal standards, at least some level of minimal standards for voting systems across the country. And they created the EAC to help set those standards with our advisory councils, like the Standards Board, which you're aware of, and we have direct communication with local election officials with the local leadership council. We also have other advisory boards, and those were built into the law, those advisory boards, to help us develop those standards. And so that was the major purpose, was to solve that problem that I identified back after Bush v. Gore, which we just reached. Actually, I think it might be the 25th anniversary of the Bush v. Gore litigation. So that's the historic way. We try to be an assistant agency to localities, as you're aware of, best practices, sort of share what New Mexico is doing with other states, and sort of provide guidance on sort of the Help America Vote Act to states.
And so currently, as of next week, I'm fortunate to have been appointed by our Senate Pro Tem in New Mexico as a member of the Voting Security Certification Committee, and it's VSCC for short. And I'm going to have Janice talk a little bit about that, just to kind of explain kind of because the average person is like, what does that mean? I've heard certification. I know there's machines. Like, it's obviously, if you're in it, you assume everybody is in it, but everybody is not in it. So I want to make sure those who are watching this go, okay, I kind of get that. So if Janice could give kind of a layperson version of what the VSCC is and what we're going to be doing next week in Santa Fe when we talk about it.
I have only seen one side of it, which is the side that I've assisted with. We meet and we get demonstrations of different tabulators or ballot-on-demand systems that the VSCC will be either certifying or not certifying. We test them, we take notes, we hand all of this over to the VSCC, and then that's where Amanda comes in, and that's the part that I have not seen.
So I think in the narrative on elections, for at least as long as I've been clerked with, I'm starting my 7th year, is there's something amiss with the machines. I think it's important for voters to realize that there is such a finite process that happens years in advance, connecting, certifying the machines, and confirming 100 different times over that they are accurate, that they have been vetted, that the best in the business have worked through them and recognized that they are top tier, they are secure, and there's something that every New Mexican should be proud that we do and have. And so that on our end, in terms of being on that board, we do review all the software, hardware, the vendors who come in, and basically do our research, and then we certify them to be used by the state for our elections. And so, and maybe Commissioner, you can talk about, is that the process in every state? As far as I know, you don't know every single state. There's a lot of them. But in your experience, when you have been to other states and talked about how they kind of put the bow on it, is that something similar to what other states have had in your experience?
Some states do that, yes. I mean, I think I served in Virginia and Florida, and it's very similar to what you mentioned. You either have your team or a board review the systems, and I think that's natural because when I served at the state level, even though I appreciated what the EAC did and sort of the rigorous testing, when bringing a system in, I did a little bit of testing on my own with a tester and then had a test report. And so I was able to say, look, not only did you have the federal testing labs look at this, you had EAC staff review it themselves, but I also looked at it from the perspective of Virginia, and I had my team look at it. And so we feel very comfortable that we've had multiple eyes on this, multiple folks have been testing it, not only for from a federal perspective, but also for our individual state. And so I do know a number of states that take another look at it. And there's different ways of doing that through a board of examiners or a board of election officials, a state board. But I think that that is another way that when the public looks at this, they should looks at a machine and say, well, is it secure or not? It's had multiple sets of eyes at the federal level, the state level, and then the local level. As you know, we do testing and logic and we do logic and accuracy test after and before every election. So you're getting multiple tests of this equipment at all levels of government. And usually there's public involved as well. So they're able to see this testing taking place.
And I am going to start using the word EAC versus kind of spelling it out. But with the EAC, you all have really given us a lot of good feedback and ideas from other states. But what I really appreciate is your willingness and openness and desire, and I know it's in statute, right? So that always helps to have local boots on the ground folks like myself, like Janice, give feedback on what's going on in New Mexico. Moving forward, can you tell us a little about what you love about the voting HAVA? First of all, I think that's kind of something that the average person may not know about. We use acronyms quite a bit, but that's something you've kind of gone into the weeds and I think a lot of New Mexicans and Americans in general would like to know how that works and how it actually affects their elections. If you could talk about the HAVA Act, that'd be great.
Sure. I mean, the Help America Vote Act really was a significant change for the election community because we already talked about the voting systems, but those voter registration systems were also they really didn't exist uniformly across the country. Only a few states had statewide voter registration systems, and they weren't well connected with, let's say, the health department or the coroners, the vital statistics, or the driver's licenses. And so you had a lot of counties that weren't even communicating with the other counties. So basically, with the 8,000 counties or jurisdictions, everybody was doing their own thing and not really communicating. And now we think that can bring a lot of problems. And so when they did develop the Help America Vote Act, they actually had registration requirements at the state level to create databases so the states could communicate with each other and with the state, and there would be state institutions that would provide data and sort of make sure our voter lists were there was verification and there was electronic list maintenance going on for deaths and that sort of thing. And folks, don't really remember that, but that was a huge lift across the country. And one of the big things that happened with the Help America Vote Act, it also created what we call provisional ballots, where, you know, because of some of the problems with data, someone would show up at a polling place and not be in the right polling place. Um, they may not even be registered, but they think they're registered. Well, what we found is that sometimes after a little bit of research, you'll find that the individual was properly registered, or you'll find that they weren't. But the Help America Vote Act allowed there to be what we call a provisional ballot, where a voter could vote the ballot And then the election official would go back and research this. Now, again, this was sort of handled differently around the country, but this was sort of something that we provided guidance on, and it was implemented. And it really was a fail-safe ballot that voters could vote a ballot if they really felt that they were properly registered. And then the election official could go back and investigate to see if that was true and to see if there was evidence of that. And if there was, the ballot would count. And so we're really proud of that. The other couple of things I would just quickly mention on HAVA, or the Help America Vote Act, would have set up a mechanism for federal grant funding, for infrastructure building, for new voting machines when it's necessary, for electronic poll books, all types of needs of the community that the federal government, when they decided to appropriate funds, it would be made available to the states. And then the last thing that it really required was it was more of a duty for election officials at the state and local level, plus in our territories, was to provide data back to the EAC after every federal election, and then provide a report to Congress. And in some ways, it's a report card that I'm pleased to provide to the Congress because it really does show how well local election officials are doing their work. It provides that in a report form to Congress, all the statistics they need and want, and allows them to monitor how things are going. And so, in some ways, it's a little bit onerous on election officials to provide that after every federal election, but it really is an opportunity to show our work to the Congress and say, hey, look, this is the great work that's taking place in the states and localities across the country.
So, what I would say is your role on the Election Assistance Commission and the feedback you get from local people, I know is valuable. I know you listen because I've had conversations with you. And that's kind of something very cool, I think, about your role and the role of your colleagues, is that you were out and about across the country constantly. Prior to us getting in recording, you just said you gotten back from a 4-day trip. And I said, oh, was it fun? You're like, yeah, sure, but it was work. So I have been fortunate to meet you many times, and your willingness to talk about whatever has been great, but also your experience as an election administrator has been invaluable, because when I talk the shorthand, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
No, it's all about relationships, and just like when I served at the state level, building that relationship with the counties and the cities and the localities, and that person. So when a crisis occurs or implementation has to occur, we have a relationship as we move forward, and it makes the process of elections much easier. If you just call someone the first time when there's a crisis, there's not that relationship. So it's a big country. We have 4 commissioners. We're all out and about trying to develop those relationships. So when we are pressed with a crisis, an emergency, or just to assist the localities, we have that relationship that's been built.
Janice, I know you've probably been at spaces where the chair has been as well, so you recognize him. He has come to New Mexico. When you think about security and what we do in New Mexico, Janice, can you talk a little bit about the faith that our fellow New Mexicans, and probably those, because as much as we say like every state has their own election, we generally have the same practices. How we implement that, sometimes there's gray areas, right? And there's ways that things that New Mexico has. We have an amazing early voting. Half of our participation comes from early voting. Some places don't have early voting, which I find amazing in its own way. Can you talk about the security that we have embedded in New Mexico elections and some of the things you're particularly proud of, because you've seen it along the way?
Elections have come a long way since I started. Mm-hmm. When I started, we really just had a printer in a room where everyone walked in and they got like a pre-printed ballot. Actually, they had to sign a signature roster, which is basically a list of every single voter in that precinct, in order to get their ballot. At the end, we counted the signatures and made sure the signatures matched the number of ballots that were voted on. That sounds
very painful compared to where you're at now. Yeah.
Since in 2012, we went from precinct polling locations where you had to be a voter in that precinct in order to vote or get a provisional ballot, to voting convenience centers, which opened up voting availability for voters. They no longer have to go to a certain precinct in order to vote.
Right. I remember when I was a student at New Mexico State University. Go Aggies. I always have to say that. Go Aggies. So I remember being a student and standing in line at the apartment I lived in, right, like near there, and, standing in line 20, 30 minutes and getting actually to check in. And they said, oh, you're at such and such.
Right.
And I'm like, but I've stood in there. And so I don't remember necessarily not voting, but I know that is a barrier to some folks. So what convenience centers are literally, you are anywhere in Doña Ana County, and this isn't just in New Mexico, you can vote at any location. If you work in Chaparral and you live in Hatch, you can vote at either of those because we have an electronic poll books. We don't have any pre-printed ballots. We look you up in real time and we print the ballot appropriate to your precinct. Now then the question comes, because I always want to say, like, what's a precinct? Does the average person know what a precinct is unless you're heavily involved in elections? Maybe not. And basically, it's the area in which you live. And there's a certain amount of number per precinct. We have 190 in Doña Ana County. We have grown considerably. And that means great news is people are voting and people are moving here. So we love both of those things and we've been able to expand. So I just want to pop in those things that the average person may not know about elections, because we tend to talk in shorthand and assume like other people, because that's what we talk. We talk elections. And I'm sure, Chair, you know exactly what that means. Connected to what we have a new administration this year, and you are an appointed official. You are now chair, and I'm grateful for that. And I hope the Election Assistance Commission is here from now until the end of time. And so can you talk a little about some of the challenges and maybe even champion some of the successes we've had this last year connected to elections? Because I always want to focus on all of the things, not some of the things that kind of narratives carry press-wise, right? Like there's always things to celebrate as well. And so feel free to talk about anything connected to that you've come into since we've had a new administration and we continue to do the day-to-day work of elections in our country.
Well, I think once again, we went into 2023 and 2024. I think you would agree that, wow, 2020 was a little bit crazy, and it's going to be even more crazy. I think election officials, though, even going back, in my time, presidential elections are just very busy. It's like a tsunami and hurricane that's taking place. And so it's all hands on deck. It's adding staff, it's adding polling places, it's adding early voting sites. It's just all hands on deck. And so there was a lot of there was some foreboding about, wow, it's going to be, a really controversial election in 2024. Are we up to it? And the answer is election officials always show up and they always get through this. There's always going to be a little hiccup here and there, but 2024 was a really good election. It was well run, and so we at the EAC were very happy because states did a great job, and there were very few major issues. I wish sometimes election administration wasn't as controversial as it was, as it can be. Sometimes the spotlight has been on other areas, involving voting. But I think that we're a bipartisan agency. We have two Democrats and two Republican commissioners, and so we try to find consensus on how we can help states and localities, and then obviously in talking with both sides of the aisle and local and state. Our standards board is a perfect example of that. It's the chief election official or representative from the state and a local official plus every territory, and we all get together at least once a year and we talk about issues like this, and we value that. And so we just try to continue moving forward. Sometimes we get lost in the budget wars, but it's like, yeah, we're a small agency, but we have a really key role. We're trying to make sure that the nation's voting systems are protected and those standards are strong, and so that the equipment that is used out in the field and electronic poll books and voter registration systems. Those are protected and have the highest standards. And so we try to make that case to the Congress every year that we have a vital role in supporting state and local officials across the country. Otherwise, just as we talked earlier, every state in the union would have to have a full certification process, would have to have a full lab to test. Um, we're sort of there to sort of help find efficiencies for states and locals across the country. So not every state and every county has to do their own standards. We should learn the lessons of what happened in Florida and why the Congress came together, 20 some years ago to pass the Help America Vote Act.
Right, and it's interesting. I think that you specifically mention it's really not a partisan issue. We've not even talked about your party affiliation or my party affiliation or Janice's, which I literally don't know, because that's irrelevant to the work that we do. And I think that's something and I know that your colleagues as well, and I just happen to know kind of how they've been appointed, right? But at the end of the day, as an election administrator, as somebody who has overseen systems, overseen organizations that administer elections, I imagine you have a deep faith in the work that we do.
I do. I mean, I've seen it. We've been through hurricanes, earthquakes. I've been through loss of electricity, flooding, and that's just what I've been through with local election officials as the director in Florida, and then I've seen that across the country. And so not just the administration of an election winner is not necessarily a natural disaster or event, but then you observe what's taking place in different parts of the country and the things that they've overcome. And it's all to get the job done. The job always gets done, no matter the challenge. And, at the end of the day, I'm very proud of the work that we have done and the work we're doing. And I think it's vital. I mean, I come from the military where there's a greater purpose than just our individual work. And it's one reason I got sucked into elections is because I really do think it's core democracy work, where it's like a police officer or a fireman. It's like, when it's getting kind of crazy in the political scene, the election official is always going to be there as a referee to make sure that not only do we vote on this day, that we vote in the future, that we can vote for another day. And so I'm very proud of the work and the relationships that I built and the EAC's built to strengthen elections across the country.
We have seen that implemented in real time in our state for sure, and really appreciate that. But I have a kind of a fun question. What is the average election day like for you? I know for us, we are here at 5 o'clock. If we're lucky, we get home by midnight or 1 a.m. And then the work begins. People think it ends on election day when the reality is we know there's a lot of checks and balances that we have to go through again and again and again and again. And it's not official until it's official. And so the average person doesn't know that. I'll never forget, I was telling somebody close to me, like, oh, I'm stressed out. This article came out in the newspaper. They just have bad information. And, everybody's focused on it. And he said, and this is what he said, and I don't think what he literally meant is, he goes, nobody cares. And I said, no, he's like, you are so looking at through this lens. The average person has moved on. They read the newspaper, they saw the results, they're like, huh, and then they went on with their lives. But we're in this bubble of looking. And so when he said nobody cares, what he meant was like, you are so focused on it, you can't see the forest for the trees, and you think everybody's as focused on it as you are. And that is true. When I start talking to people, they're like, oh yeah, what is the average election day like for you? Because I know for us it's craziness, stress, and then that continues for the next month.
Yeah, when I was an election official, it was a long, long day waiting for all the counties to get the results in. And then, obviously praying that there's not a recount. Oh, in Virginia, I had a statewide recount, and that was so much fun, and that was so exhausting.
So much fun.
It was crazy. So I suffered through that. But I think that as an EAC, I've done a couple of different things. Some fun, some not so fun. One is, when you go to different states, different time zones during the course of the day, and you end up somewhere on the West Coast. as the results are coming in.
Do you literally hop on the day of? You travel on the day of to other? Oh,
We've,
wow.
yeah, and one time I actually drove to about seven, one election I drove to about seven different Florida counties since my home base is here in Jacksonville. So I visited about seven counties during the course of the day and then ended up, I think, back home in Jacksonville. The worst experience I've had was going to the FBI. The FBI puts a war room together, and so being in the bowels of the FBI for literally 20 hours is extremely boring. And but So we did that. I did that service one year, and I got to tell you, I actually had a lot of fun this past presidential. John Fortier and I, we do this podcast called The Voting Booth, and we actually interviewed about 50 election officials over the course of the day, some of
Oh,
them on a Twitter space, but we actually had them come on and talk about what's going on in their state and county. And it was a great way to get a taste of what's happening, and try to get it out there for the public. Because I was like, at the FBI, I'm like, I'm sitting here, and we're getting some reports, but it's like the public isn't hearing anything of the great work that's going on. So I was like, let's do something public. Have the election officials actually talk to the public about what's going on. And so that's what we did this past presidential.
and so on those days, well, just know that you have an open invitation to come to southern New Mexico and our beautiful borderlands. We tend to be a little bit high profile, partly because of our border area. We also have one of the most highly watched congressional district races in the country, and I think I'm sure you're aware.
That's
Well, maybe.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting is a good word, and it has had its ups and downs. And you may not know this, but I was appointed in 2018, about 5 days prior to elections beginning. The clerk prior to me had resigned, and I was sworn in and thought, elections is so fun. This is going to be great. And then on election day, I remember midday going, when does this get fun? Because this was very stressful, right? I mean,
It
the
is
idea,
stressful.
yes, it's stressful. People are counting on you. People are waiting. How do we plug the holes? How do we fix that? Deploy this person. And when you don't know what you don't know, then it's even more stressful, right? So at the end of the day, we had a delay in the counting of the absentee ballots through no other, and just because we were understaffed. It wasn't that complicated or controversial. Then it became a story, and then we had to fight that kind of narrative for the next several months, and sometimes it still pops up as a narrative. And we deal with it at that point with truth and transparency by saying we weren't well staffed. We fixed that. And another problem is we didn't communicate with the public what was going on. We have fixed that. So we just kind of learned from that. And then I say the great news is in 2018, Doña County voters participated in historic rates through absentee, and that is good news. And so let's kind of focus on that, right? But know that you have an open invitation to have real good Mexican food, and an amazing staff here, and then of course our community members who literally we could uplift elections, and we could not do it without them. And so
I love visiting polling places because that's where all
isn't
the
it
action.
fun? You're an electioner when you're like, aren't polling places fun? Don't we love it? Yeah, no, I agree. What do you think in terms of kind of fun stuff that election officials could implement that you've seen maybe across the country? I know we have implemented the ringing bell, ding, 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 when we have a new voter. And I think we like to punctuate that and make them feel welcome, because we know what that means is we are really hopeful that they will come back, right? Again and again
Yeah.
and again.
My son voted in the latest New York mayoral primary, and there was a new voter, and he just happened he loved that tradition. He thought it was great. And I also think another really fun thing is the I voted sticker, competition, that we do with states. And New Mexico's done really well in that competition. And it's great submissions. And we want to even do more at the AC with that, particularly with the 250th anniversary. One of my ideas is to have ideas from the states on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in the country, and having a I voted sticker that's special for the 2026 and maybe 2028 election. I think those are the type of fun things that get voters involved, and I think that's fun.
Yeah, and Janice, you probably, the I voted stickers, how important are they to voters?
They're very important to our voters. They tend to get upset if we run out, so we have an abundance
Overbuy, yes.
At all of our locations.
One of the other things is, and I know you got to be careful because there's some First Amendment controversy over doing selfies in a polling place. And I know that can slow things down in a polling place, but having a certain area or outside, having an area for a selfie, I think people like to celebrate that. When you go to overseas to a foreign country, they like to take pictures as they're taking their ballot and putting it in to this ballot box. And I really like that tradition. And I do have concerns that it would slow things down a little bit. But isn't that a great thing? Because everybody's showing off that they're voting, and I like that.
Well, I agree with you, and not only that, Chair, but what happened? We have a backdrop at every one of our voting convenience centers where we encourage selfies with families, friends, especially if they're kids. We also have a hashtag DAC votes that we encourage to put on any of their socials to punctuate that. Is that something that also, along with the bell, that I kind of really wanted to do? And it's like those little things I think that can make it fun and celebratory versus like this, oh, I have to go vote, it's an obligation. And there's been times when I've walked by and someone will say, will you take a selfie with us? And I'm like the queen of selfies. So I'm like, yes, we kind of do the thing. So I agree with you. There are ways that we can definitely make it fun. I do want to tell you, and I talked to you about this several months ago, we are fortunate in Doñana County because when I first started in 2018, we were in a warehouse that wasn't sufficient to meet our needs. And so over a couple of sessions, I lobbied for and was fortunate enough to receive over $4 million for a new build for a warehouse that's going to be adjacent to our large county government building. And so also, I know I had talked about, I want you to come. You can cut that ribbon with us. You can do all. We are now looking at late September, October, but that means that we will have a brand spanking new warehouse, cutting edge, transparent. We're talking glass partitions so the public can watch our process, cameras that will watch the details. And we are super excited about that. But I definitely want to extend that invitation to you and your colleagues. And it would be a real fun experience, I think, to see it come to fruition. And I always say, like, this is when government works, right? Because I think the public gets super frustrated sometimes when they're like, because I have a supportive county administration and elected officials, relationships are everything. And because they deeply understand why and how we needed it, we were able to get it done. I was able to get it lobbied for. But it'll be a celebration, I think, because I think in the South, sometimes we don't feel like we get the new shiny things. And so well beyond when I'm not here, that will continue to be something new and shiny for the immediate future and have our staff, be able to take advantage of that and feel like elections are important. Like, this is something that they prioritized, and our legislators from the South heard me and believe in elections, and so they put their money where their mouth is, and we're going to be excited to open that for sure. So I definitely would love it if you were able to be here and explore the borderlands. I think that they're definitely underappreciated, and the shocking thing is New Mexico exists outside of Albuquerque and Santa Fe. It really does. And so that would be us in the
beautiful.
South.
It's very beautiful. And I appreciate the invitation. You're very fortunate. This has always been, having enough space is a major issue with election officials across the country. So very wise commission or county.
Thank you. I'll pass on that good word to them.
I hope I can.
No, that would be great. Maybe you can say a few words. Yeah, and I wanted Janice to tell you about some of the initiatives we have for kids, and then I'm sure you have a busy day, and we'll kind of say our goodbyes. But I did want to punctuate this in terms of kids voting, kind of some fun things that we are implementing.
So this year, we've done sticker contests in the past. This year, we are having one of the charter schools with the elementary school kids design an I voted sticker for us in a contest. We are also, for the first time ever, here at our government center, we are going to have a little booth and voting area set up with ballots with ice cream flavors or something for the kids to vote on while their parents are voting. So I'm hoping that goes over well and that the kids enjoy it, and that they'll keep coming back after they experience that.
And I'm just curious, how do you like doing podcasts?
Well, I just like to talk to people, right? And pick their brains about what's going on in their life and what's going on in their career and that great ideas that people have. And I do a lot of it with the EAC as well, but I thought John Forty and I, we just decided that we're a pretty good team and sort of questioning people. We've been on panels with the Bipartisan Policy Center, so we decided to start the voting booth where we could do a podcast, and we could do it in their studios, and we could invite election officials and experts in different areas on both sides of the aisle to talk about elections. And so it's a voting booth, but it's a big voting booth. We can all get in there.
Well, I appreciate that. I also think if you haven't followed any of our socials at Doñana County, I would highly encourage you to. What I will say is, and I think we have the best in the state in terms of our comms and what we do. We have a podcast. We have a YouTube page. Our moniker is Preserving History and Democracy because under the statutory requirements, we are, of course, the record holders as well as the election administrators. And I thought that was a good kind of connection between the two. And I will say I always give my team credit for everything. But the one thing I will say is I had the brilliant idea of hiring a motivated, talented 18-year-old here who was here as an intern, and his dream is to do all things media. And so between the ideas that he has had in terms of content, because let's face it, we're a little up there and we may not be on boots on the ground in terms of young people. And so it has been phenomenally successful, recognized statewide as being just an absolute stellar way to communicate with our public in all of the ways. Because this is the way it's coming, right? Podcasts, YouTube pages. It's not like how we used to do it, Commissioner, right?
We keep evolving. I mean, I like the fact that you have a podcast model here that's also got video. Me and John have talked about that. I think he likes the just the audio in studio part. So, but it's like, when are we going to bring this to YouTube? And we kind of laugh about it.
Highly encouraged. Yeah, highly encouraged. And I will say, I did radio for several years
Yes.
when in my other role at Department of Health. It was a health themed show, but I did talk radio, so I could do this all day long, literally, probably. But what I will say is, I just did radio, and so the joke was, I have a face for radio, ha ha ha. But now there's no getting behind you. At this point, we're in front of the camera, and that's just kind of the way it is. But that's okay, right? Because it's about the content, right? So for sure. Was there anything else you would like to tell all of our many, many, many viewers and listeners? Something about elections that you wish the average person would know?
That's difficult. I mean,
I believe in you. Pick it out, like one thing.
two things. The first one is that when you move, you may assume that the government knows that you've moved and your registration, and we're all aware of that.
We're nodding over here. We know where you're going with this.
Be kind to your election official. Let them know when you move. And that will allow them to update your registration and take care of that sort of business. The other thing is that we need poll workers, and that it's not just enough to be election ready and to vote. Consider being a poll worker, because that's a great opportunity to get to understand voting a little bit, and then to also serve your neighbor and your fellow citizens. And so it's a great, those are two things that I wanted to share.
I would say, and also what you said, Chair, is that it really will dispel misinformation, which we're constantly combating as election officials. And I'll go off on one example. I didn't vote. Basically, something is going on. Somebody's using my name. And it becomes kind of the story. They may post it on socials, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, he didn't vote. But they're saying, and then we look into it, right? Because I'll always say this. Election officials, clerks are more against voter fraud or anything nefarious than anybody else. We would never co-sign or kind of hide anything. We want to know what's going on more than anyone, because we're responsible for the process. And in some cases, we are elected to make sure that we're doing a great job. And so inevitably what will happen is oh, well, my son checked in my name and he still had the old address, and I'm a senior and he's a junior, and okay, maybe nobody voted, right? Maybe nobody voted in my name. Another thing would be the dead voters or voting, that kind of a thing. And so I appreciate you saying, remove voter registrations, update information. That can only help our voter rolls, and that can only increase faith in our voting public, right, for us.
Absolutely. The voter can do so much to help the issue and improve our voter list. It's a lot of it rests with them. And so we want to get them engaged on this. So
right. So we do everything we can to decrease barriers and maximize information so they can do that. But at the end of the day, the onus does fall on the voter to update the information, just like you do with your Visa card. Do it kind of with your voting.
Don't forget your election official.
Don't forget us, please. We want to help and support you in all the ways that we can.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Maybe you can bring one of your colleagues next time. You all are a fun team for sure. And I appreciate the accessibility that you offer us. You're very important. You're somebody that nationally is known for all that you do. And it is an honor not only for you to be on our podcast, but for you to come to New Mexico and give us feedback and help and support us. So we definitely appreciate you taking the time this morning. I'm sure you're off and running to somewhere else. But we hope that when we near our opening of our election warehouse, that you will be up and running to our little county in the South.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you bringing me on, and thank you, Janice. Nice to meet you.
And thank you all for watching this episode of Preserving History and Democracy. And we are, again, the Doñana County Clerk's Office. We have amazing contact, amazing people, a lot of community that comes in and talks to us about their involvement and their connection to our office, because you'd be surprised at how much there is. So we appreciate you. Until next time, have a great week.